Welcome friends to this new series of containers and Kubernetes. So in this lecture, we will see how you can run the MySQL database in our container platform. So basically, we are going to run this MySQL database instance from the container platform. So if you go to this Docker Hub page and if you type hub.docker.com/_MySQL, you will be landed in this particular page where this MySQL container image is provided by MySQL community, and this is a Docker official image. So if you check this particular page and if you come down below, you can find that how you can run the Docker image MySQL as your container. So if you run that, you are basically running the MySQL database engine in your host. So this is the command. So it's just like the other Nginx or other Docker images that we ran in our system. So it's just basically the same. So Docker run minus name, and then just provide the name of this container, that is some MySQL. But now here some special things come around this MySQL container image is to provide some environment variables called MySQL root password. And this is the environment variable. How we can call the environment variable is -e. So here you will see that MySQL root password is set as MySQL PW, and you are running it in background. So background is specifying by -t, and then you are going to provide the Docker image, that is MySQL, and then you can provide the tag as well. So if you run this, then you are going to run the MySQL container. Now I am going to slightly change this. If you provide another environment variables to run the MySQL, because if you run this particular command, your root password is going to be set. But what about the other users, the normal users, the non-root users, how they can going to log into this MySQL server? So if you scroll down below, you can find the list of environment variables. Those are actually provided by this official image. And you can find this MySQL root password, MySQL database, and all those environment variables are there. So let me go through the important ones very quickly. So this is the root password where you can provide the password of the root account of this MySQL database. Apart from that, if you provide this MySQL database environment variable, so the initial database will be created for you. So the next is coming the MySQL user and MySQL password. This is where you can provide the different username and their corresponding password. And you can see these variables are optionals, and that is the reason in the first command, it was not mentioned that what can be our MySQL user and the password. But if you provide so, then it will create a new user for you, and you're going to set your users' passwords. And these users will be granted super user permission. So this is the main important part you need to understand, that if you do so, if you provide these environment variables and if you create the username and password along with this container, then this user will be granted super user permission for the database. And that is going to be supplied from MySQL database variable. So this is a variable where you are setting the database, and for particular this database, this user will be granted as a super user. And now this particular parameter, MySQL allow empty password, will basically help you to set a non-empty value like yes to allow the container to be started with a blank password for the root user. So it is not recommended to keep this as empty, but the options are there. And there are other several environment variables. I'm not going to go deep into that. For example, random root password and so. So basically, those are not very much important. So what I'm going to use this MySQL root password, MySQL user, and MySQL password. If you do not specify this MySQL database, this particular user will not be granted to the super user permission anyway. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to run this Docker container, but the thing is that this particular database will be running from port 3306. And if you want to change or if you want to map this particular port to a different port from the host, you can specify the -p option. And if you did not watch that video, maybe you can go through that. I'm going to provide the video link in the comments below and the description of the video so that you can watch that video and you can be familiar how we can port map. Okay, so now let's jump to the console. This is our virtual machine where we had run the Nginx container in the previous lecture. So if you see that we had this Nginx 1 and 2, but those are exited, those are now running. Right now, there is no containers running at this moment. So now let's try to run one container for the MySQL. So it's very simple to run. So Docker run -d. -d is for running the containers in background. And now my environment variables come into the picture. So first I will say MySQL root password, and we will provide a password like root 123. And then I'm going to use this environment variable my SQL user, and maybe I can keep it as user one. And then I'm going to keep the password as normal PASSW0 or D. And then I'm going to map the port 3306 on containers to 3000 in host. So right now my host will be accessible for the MySQL server as in the port 3000. And then I'm going to keep the name as MySQL Server. The container's name will be MySQL Server. And finally, the Docker image is MySQL. So if I run it, it started to run the MySQL container. And if I go to check the running containers, I can see the MySQL container is running. Now let's go to this my GCP's cloud shell, and this is actually running outside the VM instance. This is the part of the GCP console, and we are going to connect to this MySQL server running in as a container inside the VM machine, and this particular machine is running the MySQL from port 3000 because actually, the container is running on 3306 port, but on the host it is mapped as 3000. So from here, we are already having the MySQL client installed in the Cloud Shell. You can install the MySQL client in your machine, and you can connect to the server from that MySQL client. So now I need to specify -h, and I need to grab this external IP address from here, and I have to provide the IP address. And then I have to specify the port, which is 3000 over here. So let me copy the host IP port, host port, and let me paste it over here. And then I need to specify the user one, and password is PASSW0RD. If I do so, it is going to be connected to the host. As it is presuming this particular host is running the MySQL server from the port 3000, where actually the container is running inside this host, and it is actually mapped to this particular port where the actual container is running. So now let's create a database. Can I do so? Let me try to create one database. See, this particular create database command will fail because this we did not grant this user to create the create database command. So in order to do that, maybe we can try to connect to the root user, and we have to specify the root as user, and then I'm going to say password is root123. That is what we had set. And now I can able to create the database, create database my DB. And if I do so, the database is created. Now I can switch to this database, specifying the command use mydb. And once I change the database to mydb, I can try to create one table called T1, and maybe I can keep a column as C1 as INT, and the table got created. Now I can able to insert some data into this particular table, insert into T1 values, and maybe I can say one. I can insert one row, and then I can put another row, and then I can put another row as three, and then I can say select asterisk from MySQL. Sorry, it's the table name is T1, and if I do so, I can see the rows are inserted into this table. Now, let me exit from here and let me go to this VM, and as I can see, this MySQL server container is actually running. Now, let me stop this uh, container by specifying Docker stop MySQL server. If I do so, there is nothing running at this moment. No container is running. And if I go here and if I try to connect to this database, it is saying that I can't find this particular uh, database running at port 3000 on this host machine because this container is down. Now, if I start this container back by specifying Docker start MySQL server, and if I again go over here and if I run the same command, uh, I can able to connect to the database once again. Now, if I change the database as my DB, and it is saying that database got connected, and if I specify select asterisk from T1, I can able to see the data once again. So if, for example, in any way, this particular process which is running this container got crashed or the containers die, then we can easily start this container again, and we can able to up our database one more time without touching or without losing the data. Now, there is a catch. We will come to that particular thing in the next lecture. Uh, if we uh, if we actually remove this particular Docker image, if we say, for example, if we specify rm minus f to forcefully remove this particular container, and if we try to do this, try to select this table, it is no longer existed. Now, if we think that, okay, fine, let me start this particular MySQL server container once again by running the same command that we did in past. So let me do that. Definitely this particular Docker is started to run. It spined up the container as MySQL server. Maybe I think I can clear the screen. and I can and try to connect to this particular database once again. Now, if I try to uh, use this particular MyDB database, and I see that it's unknown data, it's saying unknown database MyDB. So you can say that this particular database, MyDB, is no longer existing in this particular container. So whenever the container is forcefully uh, removed, or the container is forcefully killed, so we are basically going to lose the same data, lose the data inside the container. So in the next lecture, we will come to know how we can mitigate this particular risk of losing data, because if we are running the database in a container and if we are going to lose the data, then what is the point of running the database in as a container from a host? So basically, there is a solution. We can preserve the data. So we will do that by volume mapping, so that the actual data will still reside in the host, and doesn't matter you are going to force off this particular container, or you are going to force off this process, or somehow whatever goes inside the machine, the container is affected, but still your data will be preserved. And we will come to that particular lecture just after that. So stay tuned and stay safe. Thank you for watching this video. In the next lecture, we will see how we can map the volume so that our database files and database data can be preserved. So please stay tuned and see you in the next lecture. Bye.